Hello, little Vickies. Welcome back to my channel. Tonight I'll be sharing some allegedly true stories from Reddit and from viewers. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps me out immensely here on YouTube. If you have a suggestion or just want to say hello, please leave a comment. I always reply. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it beyond measure. Now it's time to relax and get on with the stories. This incident happened about 5 years ago. This is a story that I never really tell anymore because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make well-meaning comments about what I should have done in this situation without really understanding how differently your mind works when you're experiencing absolute panic. But you guys seem to get it, so here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis working as an ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my door, and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habit for me to not lock my door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in the past 5 years since this day happened. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I'd started early in the day before work. My front door opened and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early and I was happily calling out to him, "I'm in here, love." I was met with silence and slowly began to feel that sinking feeling of something is wrong crawl up my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply hadn't heard me, and walked out into my living room/kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was male, older than me. I would estimate 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this moment, and was just standing there, staring at me. No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wondered if he'd maybe walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave, but as he continued to stare, I realized I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed up my chest in an attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do as a small female, and used a loud, clear voice telling him to get out of my apartment, that he had no business being here. He completely ignored me like I hadn't spoken. Then he began to pick up my things. My cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and put them into his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe this was all a mistake until that moment. I darted forward toward the only other device I had that would allow me to get help, my computer. I had to take a few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but still had about 12 to 15 feet between us, so I knew I could grab it and run before he would reach me. As I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move after me, and I sprinted back toward the bathroom because it was the only place I could go and put 2 locked doors between us, my bathroom door and the closet door. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked that door too, opening my computer and getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent message after message pleading with him to call 911 and tell them there was an intruder in the apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone and was leaving work himself to try and get me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break that door down, too. Here's the part where people usually start giving me advice on how I should have acted, but all I can tell you is that I was frozen. With fear, with shock, I don't know. But I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace the door or try to hold it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and waited to die, because I just knew that's what was going to happen. People like to tell me that I lived in an apartment. Surely if I'd screamed, someone would have heard and come to my help. Surely there was something heavy enough in my closet to use to defend myself with. Hell, even the laptop I had would hurt if swung at someone. Why didn't I do anything? I don't really have the answer for that. But the door, miraculously, held. I heard frustrated footsteps go back out into the living area of my apartment. I heard things breaking, bottles shattering, my drawers and refrigerator and cabinets being flung open as things were torn out of them. I continued to sit in that closet, silently crying, wanting to leave, but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived a 15-hour drive away, and told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort and to tell her how much I love her. I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through, knowing her daughter was in danger and there was nothing she could do to help. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I also told her to tell my brothers I loved them. To help my husband through whatever happened next if it ended badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get to the apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this invader left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband shouting for me. The intruder walked out toward the living room/kitchen area again, where my front door was located. And I opened the door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with him, pinning him in place. The man kept mumbling, at times yelling, but never really put up much resistance. This entire part is a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filled with fear mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually the police found the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that, but from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time officers arrived, it was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intended to bash them in any way. It just always seemed like this was an unusually long response time for a home invasion. They got my things back from the man and took him out of my apartment. I numbly went through the process of filing a police report, telling them what happened. One of the officers commented that I should really keep my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was being insensitive towards me at the time, or blaming me for what happened, but later recognized his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen this situation end differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was over, but I've carried the fear, the violation, the anxiety of having someone intrude into my space for years. If it happened to me once, it could happen again. If you've made it this far, thanks for reading. please consider continuing because this isn't all doom and gloom. If this or something similar happened to you and you're still struggling with the aftermath of it, the sleepless nights, the laying awake listening for sounds of forced entry, the nightmares, the constant checking and rechecking your locks, this is what eventually helped me. A year after this took place, my husband and I moved to the Midwest for his job. We selected a safe town with a nice apartment complex and chose a third-floor apartment with only one point of entry. I looked up every statistic on crime for the neighborhood, finding that an isolated incident of car theft was the only thing reported in decades. I still couldn't sleep at night. It was definitely better than staying in the same apartment in Memphis, but my husband often works nights now, and I simply couldn't continue being terrified to sleep at night. I realized my biggest fear wasn't that something could happen again, but that if it did, I was just as unprepared now as I was then. I hadn't changed anything, other than locking my door, and I knew I would likely freeze up again and leave my life up to being able to hide well enough, or having a door hold long enough to save me, and that was unacceptable. I walked into a martial arts school with an excellent self-defense program, introduced myself, and started taking classes. At first I was quiet, hiding in the back of the room and generally keeping to myself. My instructor, who is both incredibly kind and incredibly insightful, slowly built up my confidence and brought me out of my bubble of fear. After several months of training, I finally shared my reason for taking classes with him, and he's worked with me tirelessly to give me the ability to protect myself in any environment. I've been training for years now, and the difference it has made in every aspect of my life is unbelievable. The meek, quiet girl that waited to die in her closet doesn't exist. I am confident, I am strong, I am worthy of living and protecting myself in my home. I no longer am ashamed of how I handled the situation I was in, but I also understand what steps I can take to ensure that I am safe. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was worth it. I recognize this might not be a solution or option for everyone. Your experience is valid, and however you decide to cope with your own story is the right choice for you. This is how I happened to do it, and it's worked well for me. Thank you again for reading. I'm a little afraid to share this because I'm not sure how people will respond, but maybe doing so will help someone else that's feeling alone with this. If anyone is struggling with their own story and wants a kind ear to listen, I'm here. Everyone knows what doing laundry is like. Monotonous work while your brain tries to waste away the minutes it takes for the machine to finish its cycle. Occasionally having stiff conversations in passing with the strangers. This night was no different at first. As I pulled my laundry out of the dryer and began to fold it on a little table, I heard a voice over the lull of my headphones. "Excuse me, are you using this?" The voice came from a man in his late 40s, early 50s. He wore glasses that reminded me of my grandfather. He was wearing a stained disposable face mask. It hung under his nose and just above his mouth. I could see the start of a dirty blonde mustache poking out. He was gesturing to an empty cart next to the table. I simply said, "No, I'm good, I have one already." And he took it and began loading his laundry and folding it on the table adjacent from mine. Now started the usual routine questions that all lonely older men seem to ask. "What's your name?" "Nickname." "Ah, that's beautiful. So how old are you?" 22. "Do you live around here?" "Not really, the town over," which was a lie. "Did you go to college? What'd you study?" "Yes, culinary arts management." "Oh, so you like to cook?" "Yes." I tried to keep the conversation short but light-hearted. As it continued with some short remarks about the wonders of doing laundry, he asked the dreaded questions. "Where do you work? Do you live by yourself?" I hesitated on the questions momentarily, trying to keep my privacy intact without provocation. "Oh, you wouldn't know it. It's a small mom-and-pop restaurant. And no, I don't live alone," which was a lie as well. He stopped folding his laundry as I just started to load mine into my hamper. He walked over to my table and leaned against the washer so that he was in my eyesight. His eyes squinted slightly as he pulled his mask under his chin, uncovering his face. He then awkwardly called out, "So, do you want to go to the movies with me sometime, cutie?" My eyebrows knitted together softly as a wave of different emotions flooded my brain. Confusion as to why he'd even ask. I didn't even know his name. Embarrassment, as he's easily my father's age, and I'm not into that. Shock, because this man doesn't even know what my face looks like. Anxiety, because I have to reject him. I was so thankful for my mask, because I'm sure my expression was not one he would have liked to see. I softly shook my head, and he copied my actions in tandem. I fumbled out a soft, "No, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend." I studied his face as I watched his brain process my response. He knitted his eyebrows together and curled his lip. I could see nicotine stains on his teeth. He replied in an eerily soft tone, like how you calm a fussing baby. "Oh, no, you don't want to go to the movies? You have a boyfriend? Okay." He nodded his head with his last word. His eyes widened slightly as they fixated on mine. His voice grew suddenly cold. "It's okay. You don't have to lie to me. It's okay. You don't have to lie to me," enunciating the don'ts with tinges of anger. Annoyance filled me at this accusation. "I'm not lying. We've been together for 1.5 years. I love him." His eyes softened as if he just now realized the 2 other people in the laundromat. He slinked away, returning to his laundry long abandoned. I looked at him as I pulled my hamper into my arms and uttered a small, "Have a nice day." I haven't been back to that specific laundromat, and I don't do laundry alone anymore. It was about 2000 or 2001. My best friend and I were 12 and 13 years old. We lived in a small town in rural Minnesota, about 2,000 people. Out of our friend group, her and I were the only 2 that lived in the country. So we understood the boredom that could ensue, but the fun things that would come out of it. Exploring the woods, running around in the cornfields, creating forts, exploring the abandoned house on their property, etc. It was a really fun time for us. One day, we decided to take our bikes and ride down some gravel roads. Her little brother tagged along. He was probably about 9 or 10 at the time. We were riding along, laughing, probably picking on her brother, when we see an old shack in one of the cornfields. The corn wasn't fully grown, so we were able to see most of it. We decided to explore it because why not? I'm now 33, so bear with my memory. I don't remember much about the outside, but I do remember what I saw inside, and it still gives me the creeps to this day. We peered inside, and the first thing I noticed were posters on the wall of the room. They were on every wall. There was a different person on every poster, and they looked angry. Some held guns pointed right at you. Some were pointing their finger, and it felt like they were pointing right at us with their eyes trained on us. In the center of the floor was a perfectly painted red circle. My friend and I remember a star in the middle, but her little brother just remembers the circle. As we were staring at this creepy scene, I feel like we are being watched and not by the posters. I looked to my right across the gravel road and into the cornfield across from us. Standing in the middle of the field is a man. He's just watching us. He's not waving his arms, not yelling at us, just watching. I alert my friends and we look at him together. I awkwardly wave and he continues to just stand there, no waving back. We are sufficiently creeped, so we jump on our bikes to get away. We are on gravel, which isn't easy to bike on, so it's taking us a while to get going. We bike away and I repeatedly turn around to see if he's still there, and he is still watching us. He barely moved and only turned his body slightly to angle in our direction to keep watching. I still can't get over how he just appeared in the middle of a field like that. Recently, I've been thinking of this, so my friend, her brother, and I started a group chat. We all shared what we remember, and they basically said everything I did above. What I didn't know was that they went back the next day, and everything was gone. Even the red paint on the floor. A week later, whoever owned it donated it to the fire department to be burned. I don't know what was going on in that shack. Some thoughts have been weird rituals, target practice for some militia dude, or just some weird creepy guy who has poor taste in decor. Whatever it was, it still weirds me out to this day. I, female, 16 at the time, was hanging out at my friend's place, Ava, 16, with another girl, Abigail, 14. Fake names for privacy reasons. We decided it would be a great idea to sneak out of the apartment in the middle of the night. For some background, it was a suburban Eastern European neighborhood, so the idea wasn't that bright, as you've probably figured. Cutting to the chase, at around 1:15 a.m., me and my friend Ava first decide to go out. The plan was to keep walking a straight line until we get to the town's river. Pretty easy, right? As we were walking, to my horror, I see in front of us a tall, middle-aged man shouting a boy's name, as he was holding a pocket knife. I knew straight off that was bad news. Terrified, I whisper to my friend very, very closely, "We need to back off. Just go backwards, slowly." With Ava being almost legally blind, she couldn't see much in the dark and definitely did not see the man, so she starts running backwards like crazy. She steps on a branch and makes the loudest freaking sound one could ever make in such a situation. The middle-aged man turns around, looks me straight in the eyes, so I say, "Fuck it," and start running too. We get back to the apartment, safe and sound. A couple drinks later, my other friend, Abigail, decides she wants to sneak out too, and me being the rebellious teen that I was, I followed her without a second thought. This time it was about 3 a.m. We were hanging out in a park, smoking and talking about boys, when suddenly, lo and behold, at the park's entrance, the middle-aged man. I tell her, "Okay, this is not good. We need to go back now." So we quietly leave the park, and thank God he didn't start chasing us, but worse, he got in a white van. It was obvious the van was following us from a distance, but that wasn't a problem as we were close to Ava's house, right? So I thought, until Abigail turns to me and whispers, "Don't let it show, but I think we're lost." And then it hits me. We had lost our direction. We start turning at random corners and desperately looking for the place until we run into Ava's dad, who had woken up to the horror of 2 missing kids. I think it's obvious that we all got a pretty bad lecture and were sent off to sleep. Looking back on it, as much as I hated her dad for that, I can say now that someone was probably looking out for us up there. I can't stress this enough. Don't play with your chances like this. There's a lot of sick people out there, especially in sketchy neighborhoods in the middle of the night. To this day, I wonder what could have been if we hadn't found the house in time. Stay safe, y'all. I was walking on a popular trail and cut off 50 yards to look at a cliff line. I followed the cliff line to the end. The cliff line curved around a bend, and at the end, I saw a shack with a mounted skull and painted symbols. Inside the shack, there were symbols painted on cloth and a desk with a few crowns of thorns. To the left of the shack, there were more symbols painted on the rock. Looking at the ground inside the shack, I could see bones, maybe from nailing the skull. The only items on the desk or shelves were crowns made of thorns or sticks. There were some leaves on the top of the shed, so it must have been made at least during this fall or before. Overall, it seemed fairly good condition for the shoddy build, so relatively new. There was snow on the ground, so I could not get a full view of everything around. There was a little bit of trash, but nothing like cases of beer and chip bags or anything. To the right of the shack, there was a bunch of wood stacked, most likely for burning, I would guess. This happened between Christmas and New Year's. I was off work because of severe stress that was manifesting physical symptoms, abdominal pain and shortness of breath, amongst other things. It was around 3 p.m. on Wednesday, and I'm sat in my living room when I hear what sounds like the handle of my back door being jiggled. However, me being the idiot that I am, thought the wind had knocked something over in my garden. I unlock the door and scan around, but nothing obviously out of place, and it wasn't even windy. I look down the side of my house, and my gate that leads to the front is unbolted and ajar. I thought maybe I left it unlocked, so went to lock it, but before I did, I peeked around it, and on the other side was a man of about 20. I said, "What the fuck are you doing?" While keeping the gate between us in case he was armed, he replied, "I got lost around the back and jumped over your wall. Is that all right?" I said, "No, that's fucking not all right," and slammed the gate in his face. I immediately reported it to the non-emergency police line and then went around all my neighbors to let them know someone dodgy is about. Some of them had Ring doorbell footage of him passing their house, and one guy said he thought he heard his front door handle make a noise at around the same time. It really creeped me out and made my stress symptoms so bad I ended up in A&E the next day, convinced the chest pains I was experiencing was a heart attack. It wasn't, luckily. When I was in the 9th grade, I had just gotten off the school bus in the center of my small, old hometown in central Massachusetts. My house was about a quarter-mile up the road, so I would walk home every day on the right side of the road, the same side my house was on. But for whatever reason, I decided to walk on the other side this day. It must have been fall, but it wasn't cold yet. My house was almost in view up ahead when I noticed a 60-something-year-old man raking leaves next to a large old house at the corner of Main Street and a dead-end road. It was gray, as I recall. It had 4 large columns on the front porch. He was looking at me as he raked, expressionless. I looked at him the same. Coming up was a large oak tree. When I passed it, the man was no longer there. No man, no rake, no sound. Too far away from the back of the house to have snuck away, too far away from the tree to be close behind it. Plus, the ground was covered in leaves, so I would have heard him walking. Just gone. I knew something wasn't right, and it was creepy, but I just calmly kept walking, pondering what I had just seen. I've never seen a ghost and known it. Although I find paranormal and unexplainable things very interesting, I do try to remain rational. I've only seen this and one other strange happening in my life, but both in this town. This is not a real encounter, as I have never actually talked to this man, but I thought it should be posted here. For some background, I live on an island and my backyard ends in a golf course. I, 17-year-old female, only live with my mom and 2 dogs. Back in August or September of 2021, I saw this man, he looks to be in his late 50s, early 60s, walking on the golf course. No golf gear, no golf cart, not even in golf clothing. All of a sudden, he walks into my backyard, snooping around, looking like he's trying to get the lay of the land. It kept happening for a while, but then stopped for a bit, then happened again for a while, and then stopped again until recently I caught him doing it again. When all this first started happening, I thought he was just a golfer retrieving a ball that was hit into my backyard. I quickly realized that it was not the case. Then I thought he must be from the golf course's staff, and that wasn't the case either, because he was not in the uniform that the staff wears. Sometimes he even gets really close to the house, which really makes me nervous, as this is a grown man I absolutely do not know and is not a golfer. It's also really off-putting because I am a minor living only with my mom, and he looks like he's getting the lay of the land and potential places he could enter the house. When I see him, I always make sure to stare at him, making it known that he is not welcome in my yard for any reason, and certainly not in my house. He occasionally catches my stare and quickly walks away looking very guilty. I was reading some stories here when I thought this might apply. It was just before the pandemic started, around February 2020. To put more context in, back then I was a 26-year-old female living alone in an apartment building. We have security and a lobby, but I almost always ask the delivery to come up to the apartment because I'm lazy. So that night I ordered from a new app because they had a coupon. I usually order from Uber Eats or Rappi, and never had any issues, so I just thought it would be the same. I ordered, and the guy tells me he's coming up, so I open the door and I see this young man fully tattooed, which I never really care, I love tattoos, but what caught my eye is that he has a tear tattoo under one of his eyes, and where I live, in Latin America, we are taught that it means he did something bad and or belongs to a dangerous group. So I was like, "Thank you, good night." And to this point, it's all good. He smiles back and said something I don't remember, but made me feel weird, and then I realized he hadn't finished the delivery on the app, and right after he sent me another message, it said, "You are so pretty," and the drooling emoji. And I know it sounds like nothing, but I promise you I got really anxious, mostly because I was alone and he knew it. Also, it was late, and even though I know sadly this could happen everywhere, a woman in a Latin American city. Then he sent me a devil emoji, and I closed the app. I thought he might come back or hadn't left the building, and nobody will know. So I texted my ex-boyfriend and asked him if I should report him or what to do, and he convinced me not to because he probably would lose the job and that wasn't fair. He told me I was being too dramatic, and because I was scared, I said, yes, maybe, but I couldn't sleep that night. Now that it's been years, I think about it, I know I should have said something, even if it was a minor situation, because we shouldn't allow this to happen. Anyways, that's my little creepy encounter. Sorry in advance if I have grammar mistakes. Stay safe, and always make sure, if you live alone, to say good night and good morning to your family or friends, so in case you don't say it one time, they'll look for you. English isn't my first language, so I'm sorry for all potential mistakes. Context. So when this story took place, I was a 12-year-old male. I live in Europe, a big city, unfortunately not very safe district. It was late June. Me and my friend, Lucas, were having a sleepover at our friend Damien's house. We ate pizza, played video games, etc. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Damien had fallen asleep. We tried to keep him awake, but he just said he's going to bed. We played games some more, but quickly got bored. Lucas started insisting on leaving. After some time, I agreed. We tried to wake Damien up and tell him we're leaving. To be honest, he was half asleep, and I'm not sure if he understood anything we said. He was like, "Whatever, let me go back to sleep." So around 4:30 a.m., we left. As I said, it was June, so the sun was rising. And it was already pretty bright. We walked for a little, and then I saw something strange. Someone's legs were sticking out of the window of some little store. I showed it to Lucas, and he asked, "What's going on?" And at that exact moment, the legs moved really fast. We were totally scared because of the early hour. It was a weekend, and we were completely alone. I just said we should run to our homes as fast as possible, and that is exactly what we did. Our houses were located in 2 different directions, so I quickly lost him from my sight. At some point, I decided to slow down and look back, and then I saw this guy who was trying to get into that store was following me. At that moment, I was scared for my life. This guy screamed, "Hey kid, come here, I just want to talk." I started to run again. He was still running after me. He screamed again, "Hey kid, just one question." I looked back and shouted, "What?" And he replied, "What hour is it?" So I said it was something around 5 a.m. He just replied, "Okay," and walked away. After maybe 10 minutes, I was back home. My mom was already awake. She was really surprised, and that I was home this early, and she got really mad I was walking alone. She got so angry that I decided not to tell her the story in fear of being grounded. But a few days later, I overheard my parents talking about this store which was robbed in my neighborhood. So yeah, I'm happy that this guy stopped chasing me. Hello again, little Vickies. Thanks for listening. Please remember to subscribe and hit the like button and turn the notification bell on so you can be notified every time a new video uploads. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description. Thanks again, and until next time, be good.